So I want to thank you all for coming out on a weeknight, Monday night. Uh, that shows a fair degree of motivation. And I'm really pleased to be able to do this. And I want to thank Heather for making it available. We're scheduled to go for an hour and 15 minutes. Is that correct, Heather? And if there are, I want to make sure that there's ample time for questions, and I'm happy to stay afterwards if anything comes up. Or, well, yeah, we'll leave it at that. And looking at the registrants, earlier today, it was clear to me we have a pretty diverse group, I think, of people very experienced in the type of training that we do, which includes a very heavy dose of Hara training. We have people I know are more or less new in their Zen career training with us, and maybe new to the concept of Hara development. And then we have people whose names are not familiar to me, so I have no idea where you are in the continuum or what your interest is. We have a little too big a group, which is difficult, actually a good problem to have, because they're not going to go over and have each of you introduce yourselves, but maybe we can spend extra time at the end. I would like to see if we can take questions. If pressing questions come up as we go along, just signal. You can look at the chat. Heather, can you help me cover the chat, please? And as I said, I want to leave plenty of room for questions and answers, particularly for the people who are very, very new to this, and also the experienced people, fine points, maybe people who've looked at the blog. And I'll try and watch the time and not ramble. Heather has a virtual hook that she wields at me periodically. So Heather, work your magic. Let me just check one thing here before we go on. Yes. Wow, okay, great. Okay, I'm going to, normally I don't do PowerPoints as part of this, but I want to start with a brief, more or less, not, you can call it a presentation, but basically a summary of Hara, of the concept of Hara and Hara development, just to make sure that everyone's on the same page. Now, for those of you who've read my blog, for those of you who've done training with me before, this is going to be old hat, but I want to be sensitive to the fact we have new people coming in so that we have a mutual starting place. So let me begin. I'm going to start the screen share here. Okay, here we go. And I'm going to start this slideshow. So what is Hara? Some of you, probably most of you know, it's a Japanese word that has multiple meanings. And it is the, I like to look at it, the beginning and the end. It is probably the most consistent part of training in the lineage of Zen, in the tradition of Zen that I study and teach. So in a bit, I'll talk more specifically about what it means in the body, but one of the main take-home points I want to leave is that I see Hara as where three dimensions of the human experience intersect. And those are physical, psychological, and spiritual. So I think maybe for those of you who've come in particularly with martial arts backgrounds, or primarily martial arts backgrounds, I think of it primarily in physical terms, or in maybe two out of these three terms. But this is the totality of Hara and why it is so important, both in our training and also for the development of people. So we have physical, psychological, and spiritual. And let me just talk briefly about the physical dimension of things. And no, if you do Hara training and you do it seriously, you do not wind up looking like this. But this is this is Hote in Japanese, and Hote is portrayed in, maybe I'll talk about that later, with a very predominant Hara, or lower abdomen. So we go into the physical side of things. I have these line drawings. My teacher, Roshi, many, many years ago, put out a manual called Hara Development. And these are line drawings that came from that. I don't know if he actually did the writing in this manual, but it was approved and sanctioned by him. So Hara in Japanese, from a physical standpoint, if you look at the geography of the body, refers to the lower abdomen. So if you look at the line drawing there, it's that sort of the larger circle. Lower abdomen, roughly the point below the navel. And there are a couple related terms that we use in our training. One is the Tanden, and that isn't on this drawing. Tanden is the Japanese pronunciation of the Chinese word Dantien, which is the center, roughly a point, roughly 1 inch or 2, it depends, it's an imaginary point really, below the navel. And that's the center of gravity, essentially, of the body. And if you can see my cursor here, the tanden doesn't reside just on the surface of the body, but it's internal. So look at it as the internal center of the body. And another term that is closely related is koshi in Japanese, which involves the buttocks muscles, the flank. And if you look at it, so if you're coming around from the back of your body, you have your buttocks muscles, your flanks, and your lower abdomen. Those work together as a unit. And it might be an arbitrary distinction to talk, to make a difference between Hara and Koshi. And here, this is one of the most critical points when it comes to Hara development. And in the Taoist tradition, basically Taoist thought or Taoist alchemy, it's thought of that the lower abdomen is the realm of water. If you can think of it as a reservoir of water. And the upper body, the area around the chest, the heart, is the realm of fire. Now, what you want to do in your training is to connect these two realms. And this second drawing here, this one in the middle, and sorry for the inelegance of these drawings and the way I put them together, is if you bring, if you bring the water to the fire, in other words, if this reservoir rises to the chest, you get it gets overheated. It actually puts out the fire, and you get this kind of foul stuff. But if you bring the upper body, in other words, the realm of the chest, the realm of the fire, to the water, you're cooking the water in the reservoir like it's in a pot, and you make steam. And that's what these lines here represent. And that steam is what's called in Chinese qi and in Japanese ki or ki. That is vital energy. That is elemental to the training in our system. So in our training, and particularly in Hara development, we are bringing the energy, and usually it's tension, in our upper body down to our lower abdomen. And when that happens, wonderful things happen. Wonderful things occur. Okay, so that's simply physical. So you have the geography. You have Hara lower abdomen. You have Tanden to one point. You have Koshi. I think that covers it. Now, yes.
We already have our first question, and it might be a good time to ask it.
Okay.
Duff, do you want to say your own question, or do you want me to read it?
Sure, I can ask it out loud too.
Yes.
Please go ahead.
So, yeah, you're just mentioning the physical, and I noticed on the blog you say that it's about the lower belly and keeping it out even on exhale.
Yeah.
Is that uh, is that a requirement ongoing, or is that just sort of for beginners to recognize
Okay.
the energetic experience?
That's a very good question. I will be covering that.
Okay.
And if I don't, have Heather get the hook. Okay. But that's a critical question, very important. But I'll get to it when we talk about breathing and the developmental stages. Oh, okay. But I do want to talk about the psychological dimension of it. So this is the second. And when I think of the psychological dimension, I think of how Hara development builds character. And oh, I didn't bring a copy of it with me, but I have one here. There's a book called Hara, The Vital Center of Man by a German psychologist named von Durkheim. And there, okay, thank you. Duff again. Okay, thank you. It's the definitive book that's appeared in Western languages. European is originally German, translated into English on Hara. And he has a fascinating chapter on the use of Hara in Japanese language and culture. And I just want to talk about a couple of them. And I strongly recommend the book, and I strongly recommend that chapter particularly. Okay, but one is Hara no Oki, the person with big Hara. And here I have an illustration of it. So in English, we would say something like someone lost his head. It means that, they kind of got carried away emotionally. They lost it. In Japanese, you could say, oh, excuse me, I'm reading the second one. Well, let's do that. Hara got tatsu. The hara rises, and that would be the equivalent. You lost your head, but it means that you've brought the reservoir of water up to the chest, and with that emotionally. The first one, hara no oki, the person big hara. In English, we might say someone has a big heart. In Japanese, and sort of equivalent expression would be the person with a big hara. So that's a compliment. You have a big lower abdomen, which is one reason that we don't translate hara into English. There's no good translation. If you say, go up to someone, oh, you have a very nice big belly, it may not go over too well. The final one, final one is hara no, we'll just say the person who has not finished his or her hara, or the converse is someone who has finished his or her hara. It means that person has finished or not finished their hara development. And the person who's finished their hara development, that has connotations of wisdom, of character and integrity. So it's kind of like, that's the character development I was saying. There's a similar expression that the person who hasn't finished their hara or finished developing their hara is not fit for leadership. So it conveys a very big sense of gravitas. Let me just say one other thing before I move on. When I first learned these expressions, very, very early in the first weeks or months of my Zen training, I thought that they were metaphoric, because in English, we don't say someone lost his head and we think, well, they literally lost their head. I mean, their head's cut off. But this is literal, actually, from the standpoint of hara development, that if your hara rose, if you've brought the kettle of water up to your chest, you lose a steadiness of your emotions. Or maybe it's better to say conversely, if you keep the chest down to the reservoir of water, you're not going to lose it, or you won't lose it as long. I guess nothing's perfect, but this is not just metaphoric. So when we're training hara, when we are doing hara development, this is both. This functions on all the dimensions. Let me talk about the spiritual dimension of things. So for those of you who are not familiar with the term samadhi, samadhi is one of the very important states that one creates in Zen training and training in Zen and the martial arts. And again, there's no good definition, no good translation into English. Sometimes we say it is intense concentration or focused concentration. A more recent one we're using is relaxed concentration or intense concentration from a standpoint of no self. You lose, it's when you concentrate so intently on something, you lose the distinction between yourself and it. And at the highest levels, and samadhi is a continuum, and we can easily spend a webinar on that. At the highest levels, you lose the sense of the boundary between yourself and the rest of the world. That's why we say it's a realization that the entire universe is the true self. So samadhi is not just a mental state that you will yourself into or it just happens. It is in direct proportion, in my experience and what I've seen in my students, to your Hara. And we'll talk about Hara breathing in just a bit. When you're breathing properly, that generates Hara. Now, recently I was giving one of these talks and I had forgotten, something came to mind I hadn't thought of for a long time. I used to go to Hawaii a lot for training. Gina can appreciate this. And I remember flying into the airport there. It's like instant samadhi. Everything's clear and bright and wonderful. And I told my teacher once, I said, as soon as I land in Hawaii, I'm in samadhi. And he gave me a hard time. He said, what you need to do is to develop that without having to land in Hawaii. So we generate that through the Hara. Now, the other aspect psychologically, and this might be a stretch to these boundaries between psychological, spiritual, and physical blur, is what we call chi or ki, and I talked about that. So this one drawing of the two figures are the Nyo, the temple guardian, and if you could look closely at this, I don't know if you can from this, they have a very well-developed lower abdomen, not kind of like Hote, the other guy, but very muscular. And they represent a ki, a state of psychophysical energy is also a term that's used for ki. And they're the temple guardians. They keep the integrity of the training. And another representation of ki is this other figure, Kanon. Kuan Yin in Chinese, variously portrayed as male or female, the bodhisattva of compassion. And you could look at the Nyo and Kanon as being, well, these are opposites, but they are opposites, they are one and the same. The compassionate energy should mirror or be the same as those of Nyo and vice versa. There we have it. I think that's it. So we have psychological, spiritual, and physical. Now, the best way to understand Hara, or really the way it really comes up, is through breathing. And that's going to get into your question. A lot of what we do when we do Hara development is to work on our breathing. There are relationships with posture, but in my experience, and I can talk about this later if people want, to me, the key to the training was more in breathing than in posture. And I know people that vice versa is the same. So this is maybe idiosyncratic to me. Whoop. Okay, so I'd like to talk about 3 levels of breathing. Thoracic or chest breathing. I think most people know what that is. You're using your chest muscles a lot, and your center of gravity tends to come up. When you're doing that, you're bringing the reservoir of water up to your chest. This is a very inefficient, as a relatively inefficient way of breathing. I can go into more about that later. The second level or stage of breathing is diaphragmatic or abdominal breathing. And in that, the lower abdomen goes in and out like a bellows. So when you inhale, the lower abdomen expands. When you exhale, it contracts. So actually, you're using the musculature of the lower abdomen while the upper body is relaxed to drive your inhalation and exhalation. Okay, so think of bellows, abdominal breathing, also known as diaphragmatic breathing. Much more efficient, much better than thoracic breathing. And if people just stopped with that, that's perfectly fine. I'll be talking more about that later. But we talk about a third level of breathing. Wow. We talk about it is Hara breathing. So not all Hara development is Hara breathing. Hara breathing is kind of the highest form of breathing in our tradition. And in that, and that's what you're referring to, the inhalation is similar to abdominal breathing. The lower abdomen goes out, but it stays out when you exhale. So kind of no matter what you're doing, the lower abdomen is extended. Sometimes the word, and I used to use this a lot, tension is used, but it's really not extended through tension. It's extended through relaxation. This is difficult. I have been teaching Zen for 40 years. I've had people come in with all kinds of meditative experience, high degrees in martial arts, any number of things. Very few people can do this out of the gate. And for most people, they have to develop here is Hara breathing. Exceptions are some very experienced people in Japanese martial arts and musicians, particularly wind instrument players and people with opera background. And that probably speaks for itself, particularly people with opera background. Now, this is the last line drawing I'm going to show. This was my teacher, Tana Roshi's sort of explanation of the developmental stages of Hara development. So in the first one, person is not really aware or thinking about Hara. And when that happens, the navel, the belly button, is pointing down. Then the person begins Hara development, and they start putting conscious attention into the breathing. And what they do is they relax up here, relax below the sternum, and they're getting extension in the lower abdomen, and that their navel at different times, because they're not consistently able to keep the fire down to the pot. The navel sometimes points up and sometimes points down. So up and down. The third level is when this becomes automatized. Is that the word? Automated, automatized. Whatever. You don't have to think about it. And this is done with a high degree of relaxation, but the person's navel is always pointing up. Okay. But as I've thought about this more recently, I've come up with my own schema of Hara development. And this is kind of the most common progression that people go through. Now, different people will come in at different levels, and some people will jump on, but I think this is helpful. And for those of you who are going to be teaching this, I hope that this will be helpful. As a matter of fact, I would appreciate some feedback on that. So we have the first step. That's similar to the belly button pointing down. There's no sense of Hara. Before I did the training, I had no idea what this was. Maybe I heard the word or something like that. And then you become aware of this area below your lower abdomen in terms of breathing. And generally, it starts with awareness of a sensation around the one point, the tanden. And I remember early in my training, my teacher said, it begins with a warm feeling at your tanden, it being when your breathing gets proper. And then you kind of want to expand on that. So you've gone from no sense of this to awareness of the tanden and thinking, I have to do something different with my breathing. From there, most people will develop abdominal breathing. Now remember, that's the second stage that I was talking about, abdominal or diaphragmatic breathing. That's the bellows, goes in and out. And most people, well, I can't say most people, it takes different people different amounts of time. And I do have exercises which I plan on getting to that I think can be very helpful with this. So there is the ability to work the lower abdomen in and out as you breathe and drive your breathing with that. Okay. Then once someone can do that reliably, they need to deepen it. And by deepening it, I mean a couple things. Number one, to have greater range of motion in the lower abdomen. So you're getting a fuller breath and it's going in and out more. The other is that they slow their breathing down. Okay. So when we do Zazen, Zen meditation, we purposely slow our breathing down. Okay. So that can be a long period of time. And I go back to just doing that, abdominal breathing. And one of the points that the last webinar or training I did, I realized I've really changed my approach to teaching this. Rather than trying to get people to do Hara breathing, lower abdomen going, staying out from the beginning, spend the time to learn abdominal breathing and get it down. Because if you can't do a deep abdominal breath, you can't do Hara breathing. Just not possible. Kind of what goes in, what comes out. So if you can't, if you can't expand the lower abdomen with an inhalation, you're not going to get it much more expanded when you exhale. The next step, there's a transition to Hara breathing. And that's the sense that at the very beginning of an exhalation, you can maintain expansion in your lower abdomen. Okay. From there, there's keeping the lower abdomen expanded throughout the exhalation and then deepening that. Okay, so just as did with the abdominal breathing, you need to get the sense of Hara breathing and then you deepen it. Now, how do you deepen it? Well, in the training that we do, Zazen, in the martial arts that we do, in the fine arts that we do, and in the exercises that we have. But the first step in Hara breathing is intentional. In other words, you have to focus on it and try and figure out what is it that I'm doing. And it'll come and go, and then you have to remind yourself to come back to it. So just as in that second level awareness of Tanden, you have to focus on it. You have to focus on Hara breathing. And the last is when it becomes automatic. So by and large, 24/7, as much as possible, you're keeping expansion in your lower abdomen. So I want to be clear about something that I'm sketching out a developmental course that can go over a long period of time or even a lifetime. In that I've been doing this training for 45 years and I still go back to basics. For those of you at the beginning side of this, don't worry about Hara breathing. You know what your Hara is. I want you to work abdominal breathing. For those of you who can't do abdominal breathing, I'm going to talk about transition, and we'll talk about that. I don't want people getting ahead of themselves in the game. And I also want to say, I think the next time I do this little chart here, there is a you can look at a dimension, like a vertical dimension of tension. It's very difficult to describe how you work your muscles and all with this breathing. And everyone, you kind of have to figure it out. and those of you, my students and people who worked with me before, you're probably sick of hearing about this. The way I was taught was to put as much tension as I can into the breathing, to really put pressure on it. That is counterproductive. The key to this is to learn to relax the lower abdomen, both relaxing it on inhalation and exhalation. So ultimately, what I think happens is in Hara breathing, you learn to learn to differentially tense and relax different aspects of the core muscles here. In a breath, there's kind of very subtle degrees of tension and relaxation. We'll talk about that. But in the early days of my training, we all run around and we kind of looked like Darth Vader. We'd sit down and go, ah, and it kind of gave the impression that we were breathing properly, and all we were doing is putting more tension in it and making fools out of ourselves. And I remember once sitting down at the table for dinner with my teacher sitting across from me, and I went like that. He said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm setting my hara." He said, "No, no, no." He said, "You have it wrong." It took me a while to figure out what he meant. See, I had another thought with this. Yeah, hopefully it'll come back to me.
Roshi, there are a few more questions.
Okay, let's take some questions.
One is this similar to the idea of Wu Wei? And the second
Whoa,
one,
who asked that question?
Bennett.
That's a great question.
And Duff also asked, how slow do you slow your breathing down?
Okay, so Wu Wei. I'm actually thinking of writing a blog entry on Wu Wei. And it's a little, the quick answer is yes, in that I think, is it Bennett? Is that who asked the question? Who asked the question?
Yeah.
Bennett, how would you define Wu Wei?
Well, I mean, just from my experience, I know the Wu Wei is literally not supposed to be defined, but I think it's essentially like the natural progression of the universe.
Mm-hmm.
And that was
Yeah.
kind of just in relating to the spiritual aspect of the samadhi.
Yeah. I'm sorry, what was that last part about samadhi?
When I asked that, I was wondering if the samadhi was similar to the idea of Wu Wei, and that it's like kind of a connection between you and the natural way of the universe, so like a loss of self.
The quick answer is yes. And where I got interested in the concept of Wu Wei is through non-action. The idea of acting without acting, which comes into Kudo or archery. And that comes out of samadhi. That's a little more advanced for where we are now. And I'd be happy to back channel on that at another time. But that's a real good question. But yes, I think that you could look at Wu Wei and samadhi being very closely related, if not the same thing. Okay. And there was another question. How much do you slow your breathing down? Was that when you're doing zazen or in general?
I think it was probably relating to zazen, but Duff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
relating to the Hara breathing, or you said you were slowing your breathing down.
Yeah. You want to? It's a real good question, but it's difficult because you don't want to get caught up in the counting. But most people, if you take someone off the street, you put them in a chair, have them rest 5 minutes, they'll breathe between 12 and 20 something times a minute, in and out. With relatively little Zen training, it'll go down to 4. And it's been studied that people in context of prolonged meditative periods, zazen periods, will breathe 1 time or less a minute. But you don't want to force it. So that's a trick. It's not like you want to say, I want to set my target of 4 breaths. You have to work up to it and just ease into it. There is a fair amount of psychophysical research that shows that 6 breaths a minute is optimal for a number of things. And I would say between 4 and 6 is probably pretty good. But I caution you to get hung up in the numbers. So just so comfortably slow it down and then slow it down a little more. If you find yourself straining or gasping or whatever, you're doing too much, and then back off. Now, I remember the thing I wanted to say. Back to my stages of development here. We're still on screen share here. So in my experience, a lot of times people confuse the sense of that second level, awareness of the Tandem, with actually doing abdominal breathing or Hara breathing. So they'll get an instruction, take a deep abdominal breath or do Hara breathing. They have the sensation they're Tandem and they think they're doing it, but they're really not. And I'm just saying this as a cautionary note that the sense you don't want to stop at that, and it's easy to fool oneself into thinking you're breathing more deeply than you are. Okay, I think. I'm getting okay. I'm going to turn the screen share off here. Stop screen share. Okay. So what I want you to do is we're going to do some exercises here. And the first one is just to get a sense of where your breathing's at. Now, if you're standing, probably better if you can sit, but sit with good posture. Hang on, let me see if I can switch my camera. That might give you, that's a little better. Okay, so I want you to have one hand on the lower abdomen and one hand right at your sternum. And what I want you to do is just breathe kind of slowly. Try and breathe deeply, but don't strain. And I want you to pay attention to how your hands are moving. Okay, so which hand moves first? That's one thing. Does your top hand move first? Does your bottom hand move first? Do they move together? Do they move? Okay, are you getting any movement there? If your hand is not moving at all, you're probably doing very high chest breathing. Okay. If you're getting mostly movement in this top hand here, that's more chest breathing. If you're getting movement in your lower hand, that's going to be diaphragmatic breathing. And we'll just stop with that. Okay, so just take some breaths. I want you to pay attention to what you're feeling there. Okay, so just kind of mark to yourself what that felt like and how things moved. Okay, just take some brief comments. Anyone want to comment on what you noticed? Does anyone want to mute themselves? Don't feel obligated. Okay, no. Okay, now this time I want you to take that image of bringing the fire to the water. So the fire to the water. And by that, what I want you to do is to see if you can, when you inhale, just relax these lower abdominal muscles and keep it relaxed here. So you should feel, if you have that, you should feel a heaviness and or, I don't know if you can see here, my hand moving here. Okay, so try that. One hand at the sternum and the other hand the lower abdomen. I want you to relax here. When you inhale, relax here. And part of what this is you're figuring out, you're using this as a biofeedback device. Figure out, what do I need to relax? And it's all in the relaxation.
Roshi, someone's asking, is the goal to have the lower hand move in and out?
Yeah. Yeah, for what we're doing now, correct. Yeah. See better? Okay. Okay. Anyone want to comment? Give any feedback, what you noticed? Or if you didn't notice anything?
I felt like I needed to do a little bit of pushing to get it to move.
On the inhalation or the exhalation, Jean?
Well, let's see. Inhalation.
Push it on the inhalation. So pushing your abdomen, how do you push it?
Almost like send the breath down into the abdomen.
Yeah, okay. That would square with my experience. Okay. Anyone else? Anyone else?
I'll go. So on exhale, I find that I'm only exhaling maybe 20 or 30% before I want to take another inhale. So like my belly only goes in a little bit and then it inflates really big, but then only comes back in a little bit.
Yeah, okay, that's good. If it's inflating, what we're looking for really is the inflating here. So if you're doing that, that's great. What you could do is take a faster exhalation, because it sounds like you're getting ahead of yourself with that, and then you'll be able to lengthen it at a later point. Okay, but if it's expanding when you inhale, that's great. Okay, one more. If anyone else wants to comment.
I just found that my ability to relax the abdomen sort of came and went.
Yeah. Okay. And that gets back to the idea at different stages, you have to put conscious attention into it. Okay. Okay. So this is a quick check that you can do with that. Okay. And again, if the upper hand is moving, you want to bring it down, bring the fire to the water. If no hands are moving, that either means you're doing really bang up Hara breathing or your chest breathing. Mostly, probably going to be the latter. And then remember, as counterintuitive as this might seem, and certainly it did to me when I was learning, it's in the relaxation. And I'm going to segue now into an exercise to work on the relaxation to get a deep abdominal breathing. Some of you have had this before. Again, not much we can do in terms of the diversity of people's experience here. But this is an exercise I developed. It kind of came to me one day. I'm a psychologist. I'm a retired psychologist. And there's something called progressive muscle relaxation. Maybe some of you are familiar with it. And it was developed in the 1920s or the 1930s. And the idea is you go through different sets of muscles by purposely contracting them to the point of fatigue, and all of a sudden releasing that tension. Sort of behind the idea is it's much easier to learn to tense a muscle than it is to relax it. But if you can tense it, it's easier to relax it. And part of that is just the fatigue. And in progressive muscle relaxation, you start with usually your fist and work up your arm, and then finally your whole body. Then it hit me, well, we can do the same with the lower abdomen, because in Hara development, one of the issues is most people don't have the sensation of what's going on in the lower abdomens. So we're going to do an exercise, and if anyone has abdominal problems, if they had recent hernia surgery or something like that, just sit this out and talk to me later, but go ahead and watch. And the point isn't to feel uncomfortable. But I'm going to ask you, and I'll lead you through this. I will raise my hand, and simultaneously, you should take as deep a breath in as you can. So, just fill your lungs. And it's okay, raise it up here as much as you can. And then as I lower my hand, you don't need to raise your hand. This is just for me to give you some guidance. As you lower it, I want you to contract your lower abdominal muscles, kind of like you're doing a crunch or something like that. Well, we say like you're bringing your navel to your spine. So work those abdominal muscles. By that, I mean contract them. You're kind of like you're making your fist into a ball. And then you're going to tighten it, keep on tightening it. And I'll go 3, 2, 1. Then I'll say okay or release. And I want you to relax those abdominal muscles just like you relax a bunched fist. Okay, I'll walk you through this a couple times. It's very difficult for me to do it and talk at the same time, so I may or may not do it that way. And then so the tension and relaxation are key, but also it's paying attention to the feelings, the experience of tension and relaxation. So kind of like if you crunch your fist like that and you let it relax, you feel the relaxation spread. A lot of people will experience that as a sense of warmness spreading like that. See if you can just pay attention to the difference of tension and relaxation. Let me just make one change here. Okay. Heather, can you please watch people in the second room there? We have 2 rooms going on, right? I mean, the continuation of the screen.
Yeah, but not that many people have their pictures.
Oh, okay. No, we won't worry about it. Okay, so let's all do this together. Take as deep a breath as you can. Okay, fill your lungs, and then exhale as much as you can, and simultaneously squeeze your abdominal muscles. So you're contracting them. Squeeze, squeeze, squeeze until you're out of air, and I want you to continue to contract them. 3, 2, 1, release. And I want you to use that release to see if you can drive your inhalation with that naturally. Okay, this is just a instruction 1. And then after that, I want you to just breathe as relaxed as evenly as you can. Okay, let's try it again. This sound for real. Okay, inhale, exhale, And then contract, 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 contract. 3, 2, 1, inhale. And then just breathe naturally, but pay attention. Does your lower abdomen feel any more relaxed? Just breathe naturally here. Okay, we're going to do it again. And when we do it again, I want you to pay attention to the difference of tension and relaxation. See if you can use that release of the lower abdomen to just inhale the air without trying. Okay, ready? Exhale. You don't need to raise your arm. And then contract, contract, contract. Really contract. 3, 2, 1, release. And pay attention to your breathing here. We're going to do it one more time. This time, when you release, I want you to make an audible inhalation, like I'm going like that. Okay, ready? Inhale. Exhale. Contract, 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 contract. 3, 2, 1. Okay, breathe and pay attention now to your breathing. If you feel any different than before we did this exercise, even back to when we did this. Okay. So I'd like to take any comments or reactions. How did this go for people? Just anyone want to say anything?
I noticed it was much more natural to be using the abdominal breathing after contracting, mainly because
Yeah.
my muscles kind of just wanted to expand naturally.
Yeah, yeah. And that's the effect that I'm looking for with this. Yeah. How about other people?
I
Yes.
agree. Very much easier.
Uh-huh.
From the contraction there, it just, my belly just falls and in comes the air.
Yeah. Okay, that's Tim, right?
Right.
Tim talking. Okay, good.
Oh,
Okay.
I'm not looking at the camera.
That's right. No, it's that's right.
It's dark.
I think
yeah.
it's me, not you. So, okay. How about anyone else? Anyone this is not working for people?
Steffi? Okay, you're on mute, Steffi. Steffi, you're still on mute. Steffi, can you unmute yourself?
I'm assuming your pelvic floor should also be part of this contraction.
Absolutely. And there's just limits to how much I can teach in a short time with that. That's a wonderful, yeah. And in the beginning, I talked about the koshi, the buttocks and the flanks. But yes, the pelvic floor is very important, particularly when we get into Hara breathing, which we're not doing now. This is abdominal breathing. But what did you notice about it? So can you say, how did you must have had an experience with the pelvic floor in this exercise, I'm assuming.
Well,
Must, but-
I've read your blog and I'm reading a book or two, so I'm
Yeah.
I'm starting to have some more awareness about all of
Yeah.
this. And so I noticed whenever I'm aware of my lower abdomen, I'm at the same time contracting those muscles in my pelvis.
Yeah.
lower-
Okay. Okay. And okay, that's right. Well, let me just see if I can quickly say. Yeah. Okay. So what it is instinctively when I do this, when I'm contracting my lower abdomen in this exercise, is I'm actually also contracting my flank muscles and my pelvic floor and my pelvic floor muscles, which I'm doing by contracting my anal sphincter a little bit, putting a little tone into it. Then when I release it, I lighten up on it just a bit. That's a more advanced question than I was prepared to get into today, but it's a very good observation.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay.
Dan, do you have a question? Gina? No. You're on
Okay.
mute.
Yes, I did have a question. Ken, I was going to ask, is it more or less almost as if the floor is coming up to support the lower abdomen in that part? That's what I feel.
Okay, I like that. Yes. Okay, one way to look at it, and let's see if this helps. You have your lower abdomen, and below that you have the pelvic floor. Okay, and then your picture like the water is swelling down here. You're putting, I don't want to say tension, but you're putting tone in the pelvic floor, and that supports the water. Does that jive at all with your experience, Gina?
That's what I am visualizing, and it feels like that. It feels like the two are coming together, one supporting, but not pressing on it.
Yeah, and that completely jives with my experience. That's another good observation. Now, let me say, did someone else start to say something? Did I see another light go on? No? Okay. I have a number of variations of this exercise that, and actually some of them involves rocking the pelvis, which engages the pelvic floor. We're not going to have time to do all this tonight, but Scobie, Roshi, maybe that's a good idea for a future webinar, would be to have intermediate and advanced Hara development for people who've had the basics, and we can go into that if there's interest in that. Let me, okay, let's see. We're going to do one other exercise, then I want to open it up to questions because time flies. I will say, as I said before, after, what is it, 8:45 our time, I'm happy to say on particular people have more advanced questions, we can talk about that, okay? Okay, now I want to combine these two exercises that we did before. So first, one hand on the sternum, the other hand below on the lower abdomen, on the Hara. You're going to do the same thing as before. You're going to you're going to inhale. When I'll raise my hand. No one else raise their hand, and then I want you to contract the lower abdomen, and you can use the lower hand to assist it. Okay, I don't want you to over rely on pushing it in, but really tighten it. Okay, and then you're gonna keep it contracted, I feel like I'm in helium. Keep it contracted, and then when you relax, I want you to see, can you just use that relaxation to push out your lower hand as you take the air in? Okay, is that a clear instruction? Okay, so let's try that. Everyone, inhale, exhale. Well, start again. Everyone, hands in place. Okay. Yeah. Just take a couple of breaths to regulate yourselves there. Okay. Okay. Now, inhale. Exhale. And contract as much as you can. You can put your hand in to augment it. And when I finish the countdown, use the relaxation, drive your lower hand out and try and keep your top hand stable. 3, 2, 1, relax. Now, if your hand went out, lower hand went out, just try and keep it there. We're going to do this one more time. Inhale. Exhale. Hands in place. Okay. Exhale, contract the lower abdomen, contract the lower abdomen, contract the lower abdomen. Push. 3, 2, 1, release. Now go back to breathing slowly, comfortably, and just see. Can you just keep your lower abdomen relaxed to the effect that just stays out? Okay. Anyone want to comment? Did that get any change from before? Did anyone notice anything different from doing that? No.
Ooh,
Oh, yep.
I was just gonna
Yeah,
say I
Bennett,
was able
yeah.
to notice a bit more of the navel facing upward, like in that line drawing that you were showing earlier, as
Yes.
opposed to just going in and out and in and out.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Good. All right. Now, this is an exercise for people who want to develop their hara. In my experience, this can be very helpful. But you don't want to go around in and out of your day trying to do this all the time, tensing your lower abdomen and relaxing it. Similarly, when you do zazen, that's not how we do it. Okay. What you can do is do this a couple times to break up your day. Back in the day, we used to go to work instead of Zoom or whatever. You know, take a couple minutes and do it on your own. Do it in the morning. Or when you take the cushion for zazen, you could do this a couple times to loosen it up. And then once you have good expansion and you're comfortable, then we have exercises to make that transition into Hara breathing. That will go for the next webinar people who stay around. Okay. Okay. At this point, I'd like to open this up for general questions, and then at quarter of, stay on for more specific advanced questions. So just, or actually any questions. So just open it up. Any questions, comments?
So do this exercise 2 or 3 times a day, morning, noon, and evening.
If that works for you. Like anything, kind of the more you do it, the better. You know, you don't want to do it all the time. But I would say, yeah, I would say 3 times a day. You know, you can take a couple minutes and do it. And I would think that would be really good. And see how it fits in into your life. The way I look at this exercise, this is like lifting weights. You are developing your Hara muscle with this. But you don't want to be carrying that weight around all the time. I don't. Was that Tim? Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did.
Oh, okay.
The rest of the day, am I working at keeping the breath down low? Yeah, I mean, it occurs to me, I've tried it before, and I find that I'm not thinking about it, and I'm breathing real high, and then I think about when I notice it, I relax. And is that the right approach to this, or?
Yes, 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 absolutely. And in fact, what do you have a meditative practice?
Yes.
What is it, if you don't mind my asking?
I don't know what to call it.
Okay.
Similar to transcendental, maybe.
Okay, so which is doesn't engage the breath very heavily. It doesn't, or at least doesn't manipulate the breath like we do.
Right.
So what happens in Zazen? Zazen is Zen meditation. It's kind of a cycle of what we're doing. You might focus on your breath, and then you get distracted, the breath goes up, and then you notice that you're distracted, and you go back to it. So that's kind of a microcosm of life. So you learn to do it on the cushion, to do it in your everyday life. But you did hit the nail on the head. The point of this is to do it in your life, not just when you're doing the exercise and whatnot. So the more cues that you can get, or the more reminders that you can get that the waters come up to the fire, when you notice that happened, use that to bring it down. So does that answer your question, Tim?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, okay, good. Yeah, other questions? Is that Jean? Yeah. Jean, yes?
Yes. Is this webinar being recorded, or is it recorded?
Heather? Yes.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah.
So we can replay it or refresher?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Heather will send the link out at a later point. So I think it takes them a while to process it.
We usually put it on the website of the virtual dojo. I'll send you the link right now. And it's also on our YouTube channel. We'll put it up probably by tomorrow.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I noticed that my breathing has already dropped from our
All right
today.
All right. Yeah, actually, it doesn't take that much. And again, if you do this regularly, you can go a long way with that. I'm pleased to hear that.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good. By the way, I noticed that are there more things in the chat? Did questions come in on that, Heather? I see.
There's a few compliments, like people saying this instruction made it easier, the exercise made it easier.
Oh, great. Yeah, I see that now. Yeah, okay.
I think we got all of the questions.
Okay, yeah. So other questions?
I've got a question.
Yes.
So what is the ultimate aim of this practice, and what experiences do people have as they progress in it?
Okay, that is a very good question. What is the why to this? Okay, now I got into this and I teach this in a context of training in Zen and the martial arts. In the tradition that I study and teach, this is critical to what we do. And there are a couple dimensions to that. One is a physical dimension, that this teaches a very efficient way to use the body. But the kind of deeper level is that this generates samadhi. And as I said at the beginning, that you could look at samadhi is the gateway to the Zen experience. And to say that that's a goal, that's a long story. But in all the training that we do, we invoke Hara. And it's not just training. So at the higher levels, if you pick up a water cup you want to use your Hara to do it. Now, again, there are two reasons for that. One is the efficiency of it. I don't have tension. I'm not burning up unnecessary muscle. But the other is you have a different relationship with what you're doing in the world, and that's a samadhi, or wu wei, as Bennett asked. Put that together. So there are also health benefits to this that I am convinced. There are a number of physiologic parameters, basically, for lack of a better word, that change with this kind of breathing. And even though that's not why we do Zen training, a lot of people get interested in that, particularly when they want to do abdominal breathing.
Yeah, let me, if I can just share a little bit of my experience
Yeah.
playing with what was on the blog and other things related to that may or may not be what other people have experienced. But
yeah,
I found that after a while, I could sort of get into a really calm state and maintain the breathing in daily life for, say, several hours at a time. Maybe working at the computer or something very different, not so much tense in my neck and head and, the normal stress of working on the computer. And then something would happen and I would feel the tension, literally, it felt literally like rising in my body. Is that what you mean by like the water coming up to the fire?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because it's like being in a quiet library and it's so silent for hours and hours, and then suddenly someone screams or something. Like it's just a very big contrast. Whereas it was just kind of the background all the time. It's like people are constantly screaming, but suddenly it's quiet.
I like that. I think that's good. But again, everyone needs a reminder that they have to do it, and that so there's essentially a meta level where you realize you've lost it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't have it all the time. That's just been like the best moments that I've had it.
Yeah. And then everyone, the times that you have it are longer, and the times between don't, and that's what you're working on. And again, Zazen is a particularly good way to do it because it's like a hermetically sealed environment. It's like a lab to do it. Other questions?
Roshi, Keith was trying to ask a question, and then we also have a question in the chat about.
Yes.
Okay, let's go with Keith. Yeah.
On the inhale, is it go through the mouth or the nose or both? Okay.
Yeah, great question. In this particular exercise, you inhale, and I didn't specify this. Inhale through the mouth. And then exhale through the nose. Okay. And that's in this particular exercise. But you don't want to go through your daily life doing that. Otherwise, then you turn into Darth Vader. And my teacher used to say, if you do that, you become you're eccentric. You act eccentrically. In Zazen, do you have a meditative practice, Keith?
Yes.
And what is it?
It's kind of Taoist Tai Chi.
I'm sorry, what Tai Chi?
Taoist.
Oh, Taoist Tai Chi. Okay. So in Zazen though, we inhale and exhale through the nose, and that's what I would do in your daily life.
Okay.
There's also an advantage to that, and that is by not breathing through, particularly when you exhale. That creates pressure that helps facilitate keeping the lower abdomen extended. And it's harder to do with your mouth open when you exhale. An exception to that is like we have some people play the shakuhachi, the flute, or if you like blow through a straw or something like that. That gives you the same kind of pressure. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, other questions?
Bruce, do you want to ask your question, or do you want me to?
Oh, yeah.
Sure. So in Kendo, there's a great deal of emphasis on the tanden.
Yes.
And in spoken about in terms of keeping it tight, and everything you've been teaching and talking about corresponds almost completely, except for the relaxation parts. So are we talking about relaxing the area above the tendon, or are you actually talking about trying to relax the tendon?
Well, definitionally, if tendon is at one point that's hard to relax, you can relax the hara. I mean, to me, that makes sense. In other words, the muscles of the lower abdomen. I don't think of that so much as tensing or relaxing the tendon. The tendon might, if you focus on that, that might have another effect. So, okay. Let me go into this, and if you want to stay afterwards, we can talk about this. As I said, that there's differential tension and relaxation of the abdominal core in this. Okay. If I'm truly tensing my lower abdomen, what does that mean, tensing it? I'm doing that, bringing my navel to the spine. Okay. Now I know that's not what we want to do. Okay. But if it's simply kind of flaccid, that may not be it either. So you are putting tone into it, and that really comes by engaging the pelvic floor. Simultaneously, you are tensing areas here. This ripples down. I can't demonstrate this very well with my shirt on, and if I take my shirt off, everyone's going to run. So it goes down like that. So there is tone in the lower abdomen, but it's not what I would call tension. And if you're going around with tension in the lower abdomen, you're not going to be able to keep it expanded. But there's got to be tension somewhere. Otherwise, you're not going to get it. And it's a dynamic that goes here. I believe I have a blog post on that. If you haven't seen it, Honda Roshi playing the shakuhachi, the flute with that. But as I told you before, I don't want to contradict what your kendo senseis are saying, but I think that that's really what it is. There is tension in the koshi that puts tension in the lower floor, and things are coming down like that. But if I have my lower rectus abdominis tensed, my lower abdomen is not going to be able to go out.
We're talking, great. Okay, that's what I know.
Okay.
Just as an aside, I'm a physical therapist, and we have an
I remember, yeah.
But and I actually found when I engage my tendon, the table tilt changes just from doing that action as my center of balance lowers. I mean, it was a very clear physiological. All I had to do was engage my tendon, and my feet would go down on the tilt table. And when I would relax it, I'd come back up again. Isn't that great?
I love that. I want to talk to you later, some other time about that. That's great.
I'll take a video.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'd love to see that. I'd love to see that. I'll put it on the blog. That's great. Okay. Any other questions? We've gone over time. So yeah. So people, let me just say, I would be happy if people have questions, feel free to write me directly. And then we can talk about a follow-up more advanced. But I would recommend practice what you've got for those of you who are new to this. And then if people will sign off, thank you very much. I truly appreciate your taking time out of your evening. I want to thank Scobie Roshi for her help with this. And do look at my blog. Probably everyone has seen Hara, well, maybe not, haradevelopment.org. Can you put that in the chat, please, Heather? And most of the material is in there.